I just bought this Commensal Clash for an insane price, and in this episode we will fix it, clean it, and try to sell it for a huge profit. So welcome back to the episode 4 of flipping bikes until I can afford my dream bike, which is this Commensal Supreme. In case you haven't watched the last episode, here is a quick recap. We bought this Merida trail bike which was missing a shock and had a bunch of other issues for just 280 bucks. We fixed everything that was wrong with it, installed a new shock, and made it look brand new. After that, we listed it online for $750, and it sold the very next day. The first guy that hit me up was really interested in the bike and offered me $650 to take it the same day. I was hoping to get at least $700 for it, but then I spotted this Commensal Clash and I knew it wouldn't stay available for long, so I took the $650 deal and used the money to buy the Clash the very next day before someone else did. After all the upgrades and repairs, the bike ended up costing us 380 bucks in total. We sold it for 650, which means we made exactly $270 in profit, which is not bad considering how much we paid for it. But with such a big goal, we cannot keep flipping these cheap bikes because at this rate, it'll take forever to get there. But that changes today because in this episode, I plan to flip this bike for a 4-digit profit. I came across this bike on Facebook Marketplace, but it was more than 4 hours away. So I really wanted to make sure this was a great deal. The only problem was that the seller put almost no effort into the listing, which you can tell by these super blurry pictures. But I had no other choice but to trust his words, so I decided to head to his town to check the bike in person. The bike was listed for $1,600, and if it's really in the great condition the seller claimed, I think we could sell it for around $2,500, and you'll see why. When I finally arrived, it was time to check it out. Even though the bike was a bit dirty and had a few minor issues, I knew right away there was a huge profit potential. The reason I think we can ask around $2,500 for this bike is because it's loaded with top-of-the-line components. It has Hope Pro 5 hubs laced to Hope rims along with Hope rotors. On top of that, every other component has been upgraded, from the headset spacers and stem all the way to the seat clamp, with much higher end and more expensive options. As I said, I saw a few minor issues like play in the bushing and headset and few other I will show you later. Overall, I was satisfied with the bike, but I really wanted to get it for a bit cheaper than the price he was asking. So I offered him $1,400 and he countered that offer with $1,500, which was still an insane deal. So without any hesitation, I shook his hand and headed back home with a sick free ride bike with 190mm of travel and top of the line components. Once I got home, it was time to tear the bike down and really see what we had bought. But before that, as always, we need to give the bike a good wash first. I don't know about you, but this red and gray combo reminds me of something. Oh yeah, the subscribe button that's under this video. Besides buying my dream bike, one of my biggest goals for this channel is to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. So if you're enjoying the video, hit that subscribe button. It's just one simple click. And if you thought it wasn't that dirty in the first place, here's a quick reminder how it looked a few seconds ago. The bike is clean now, but we cannot work on a dripping wet bike, so we will first wipe the bike with a clean rag, and then we can finally get to the real work. While I was test riding the bike, I noticed that it was creaking like crazy, and the noise was coming from the front, so I think we should start by removing the fork to inspect the headset and to upgrade it with something really cool, which you will see in a minute. We need to remove the front wheel first, and then we will disconnect the front brake. I know this step makes no sense to you right now, but bear with me, it will all make sense at the end. Next, we will remove the brake caliper, and I like to thread a nut a few turns onto each brake bolt to keep everything together and prevent any spacers or adapter from getting lost. Despite being a bit dirty, the bearings look great. But we'll clean and re-grease everything and hope it will solve the issue. While I had the fork out, I decided to do a quick lower leg service. Suspension is one of the most expensive parts on the bike, so make sure to take good care of it. Also, who knows when was this fork last serviced, and I want the future owner to be worry-free and just focus on riding it. And as you can see, I think this was a perfect time for a lower leg service. After removing and cleaning the foam rings, we'll dip them in fresh oil and install them back in the fork. Then once everything is squeaky clean and lubed, we can slide back on the lowers and put appropriate amount of oil in each leg. And lastly, we will torque the bolts to their spec, and with that we successfully serviced this fork. Now we can get to the main reason we even removed the fork in the first place, and that is the creaking headset. I cleaned everything thoroughly and then greased all the parts and reinstalled them. I think the gold spacers fit the bike much better than the old ones, but you tell me your opinion in the comments down below. As you may remember, I disconnected the front brake line while removing the fork, and here's why. When I bought the bike, the seller also gave me this bar spin top cap. It allows the front brake hose to route through the fork steerer tube, making the bike bar spin friendly. Since this bike was built for free ride, I think we should stick with that theme, even though I'll probably never do one. To be honest, this is my first time doing this, but it should be pretty straightforward. We'll just guide the hose from the bottom through both openings and out the top before reconnecting it to the brake lever. Of course, we'll tighten it just like a regular top cap until there's no play in the headset while still keeping the handlebars turned freely. Since I had to cut the cable in order it to fit through the top cap, we will now have to reinstall the barb and olive, and then we can connect it to the lever. I will use this special clamp to hold the hose in place while I tap the fitting in place. Because some fluid escaped when we disconnected the hose, we'll have to refill and bleed the brakes afterward, but I was planning to do that anyway. In this case, I'll just perform a quick lever bleed to remove any air bubbles we introduce, and thankfully Shimano made this process extremely easy. From this angle, you can see all the air bubbles that are emerging from the system. Now that the front brake is working properly again, I'll do the same for the rear brake while I already have all the tools out. And with that, both brakes are bled and feel sharp once again. But while squeezing the rear brake, I noticed one really annoying issue, the infamous Shimano squeak. I'm sure most Shimano owners have experienced it at some point. Thankfully, all you need to do is spray a little WD-40 on the lever's pivot points and the squeak will disappear. And just take a look at this front end. It looks absolutely stunning with this red Marzocchi fork and the bar spin setup. I was never a huge fan of clipless pedals, especially not on a free ride bike. I got really lucky and found someone with a brand new pair of Crank Brothers stamp ones, and instead of buying them, we made a trade. He was after a nice set of clipless pedals, so we swapped and both of us walked away happy. And they fit the bike so much better and made it look a lot newer. It's crazy how a small change like this can completely transform the look of the bike. I mentioned earlier that I noticed some play in the linkage, so let's check that all the bolts are torqued to spec. More often than not, you don't need to replace the bushings or bearings at all. The linkage bolts just need to be tightened properly. So make sure to check them every once in a while. We will see if that's the case today. If not, we will probably have to order new bushings for this bike. All the bolts were already torqued to spec except for the last one on the shock. I tightened it up and that took care of the issue. As you know, this bike came with Hope Pro 5 hub, which sounds amazing, but it was a bit quiet for my liking, so I decided to take it apart to clean the internals to try and make it a bit louder. In order to remove the free hub body from the hub, we first need to remove the cassette, or in this case, the sprocket. This bolt is tightened to 40 Newton meters, so getting it loose can sometimes be a real challenge. Now the free hub body can be removed simply by pulling it out. And here you can see how the rear hub really works. Inside the free hub, there are these small spring-loaded pawls. When you pedal, the pawls are pushed outward by their springs and lock into the ratchet teeth. When you stop pedaling, the ratchet teeth slide over the pawls, pushing them in and letting them spring back out. This creates the clicking sound and allows the wheel to keep spinning. Since there's a lot of friction between these moving parts, they need some lubrication. From the factory, they're usually packed with thick grease, which is great for long-term reliability, but it also makes the hub much quieter. That's why I prefer using oil instead. It still provides enough lubrication and protects the parts from wear, but because it's much lighter than grease, it lets the hub run a bit louder. Before we do that, we need to make sure everything is clean. And then I like to put some grease to the axle and bearings. And lastly, a few drops of oil on each pawl. Just like that. And then we can assemble everything back together. The only downside to this is that you will have to service your rear hub much more often. Don't worry, I will let you enjoy the sound from this Hope Hub a bit more. For some reason, there was some overspray on the frame and fork, so I used a little bit of paint thinner to remove it. It might seem like a pointless job, but trust me, it's the little details that make all the difference. And the last thing I always do before taking photos of the bike is to give the wheels a quick wipe with a bit of WD-40. It gives the rims and tires a clean, deep finish and really makes the black rims pop. And there we have it. The best and most expensive bike in this series so far, and I hope it will give us the best profit yet. But before we take the pictures and make the listing for this bike, let's see how much we spent on it so far, and how much should we aim to sell it for. The bike itself was listed for $1,600, but we got it for $1,500. We changed the pedals, which cost us total of $0, and we basically didn't spend any money on this bike. But let's just add $10 for consumables. And with that, we spent a total of $1,510 to have a bike like this. My goal is to sell it for around $2,500. And if we achieve that, it will leave us with a profit of roughly $1,000. But let's take some photos first so we can make a listing, and we will worry about the profit later. And here are some of the pictures I will use for the listing. You have to agree that the bike looks absolutely sick. I made a listing on Facebook Marketplace and listed it for $2,600 to have some room for negotiation. And then all of a sudden, I spotted my dream bike for an insane price just 1 hour away from me. But did I sell this bike fast enough to have enough money for it? Well, you will see in the next episode. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again very soon.